The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
So part 5 on the series on independent media will come out shortly, or well, as soon as I get a chance to get with Noah. Our schedules are crossing each other, and we haven't had a chance to get together and record. However, in the meantime, there are several topics that we have to talk about. The upcoming Kavanaugh hearings that are going to happen today. They probably, by the time most of you have downloaded this, they would have already occurred. I'm recording this before they happen. I just want to get a couple of things on the record before they actually go through with this hearing. The second thing that I want to discuss is what's happening with Andrew Gillum in Florida, particularly about progressive critiques of him from the left, and why you guys just need to chill out. I can summarize it there for now, and I'll get into much more detail in the second segment. And then last but not least, I want to talk about Jimmy Dore, particularly substantively on this, on his harassment of the TYT contributor Francesca. I forgot her last name. I'll get it by the time we get to the segment. But specifically on his Johnny-come-lately conversation about Syria, how bereft of any substance it really is, and how he's taken one talking point like he's done on so many issues, and he relitigates that same talking point because it's the only thing he's willing to study, the only thing he's willing to learn, and he contributes to keeping the discourse paralyzed at a time that's most beneficial to his cliques. That's coming up later. All right, let's jump right into it. First and foremost, Kavanaugh. There have been more accusations that have come out. A fourth accusation has come out against him, saying that he actually physically abused a woman. And there have been two other, in addition to the Dr. Ford, the original allegation. There have been two other women who have said that they witnessed or were a part of the sexual assaults, or the actually called gang rapes that occurred. And at the core of this are two really fundamental things that are happening, that are going on. It's the ongoing question of whether or not a guy should be responsible for something he did in his youth. And then also this whole idea of morality that is driving conservatives to push a person like Kavanaugh into being the person who's going to onto the Supreme Court so that he can specifically overturn Roe versus Wade in the name of morality. Those are the two big things. Now, first and foremost, I firmly believe that there are characteristics about you at the age of 17 and 18. Hell, there are things that show up in you at 12 that stay with you the rest of your life. Someone who, and excuse me to all of the church people who listen to my podcast now, churchgoers, I don't really have any better language right now, but if someone is an asshole at 12, chances are they're going to be an asshole at 40. If someone has rapist tendencies at 12, it's a good possibility they're going to be like that at 40. Sure, they can have a revelatory moment, a change in their character and their disposition in their life, but that doesn't. Kavanaugh isn't even offering that as an explanation. He's just outright denying it when the cases are now starting to pile up. And this case really is problematic because there was an article, and I'm trying to think who pointed out this false binary. There was an article that questioned whether or not Bret Kavanaugh was a choir boy or a frat boy. Meaning that if he was a frat boy, then it's likely that he did something like this, or the possibility is this is his character versus a choir boy. When in reality, that's such a false dichotomy when those two people have been historically the same. Historically, we see people have the capacity of having dual personalities or playing dual roles in their lives. One, the person, the front, the face that they show the world, the person who sat before the Senate a few weeks ago and had all of the women behind him and all the children behind him, and everyone was saying how good of a person he is. And the other is the guy who participated in gang rapes. And for us to have this conversation, this conversation about sexual assault, and to draw the paradigm there to say, you know, this couldn't really be him because he was this choir boy and he was a virgin. You know, this is what he said. He was a virgin until he got in college, which does not preclude the possibility of him sexually assaulting someone. We are recycling some of the most disgusting tropes about sexuality and the intersection of sexuality and sexual assault in order to excuse this guy. Another one that I saw last night was a clip of a woman who basically said groping's no big deal. And she said it this is an MSNBC clip, and she said it in front of her 18-year-old daughter. And her daughters, or there's another daughter, I don't know how old the other one was. The daughters are like, you know, nodding their head in agreement. And they're saying this in order to help the public opinion sway towards nominating or confirming, rather, Bret Kavanaugh. I'm like, this is really where we are. We're at a point where conservatives, and yes, someone tweeted to me this morning that particular clip isn't as much about political ideology as it is deeply rooted problems, views towards sexuality and sexual assault. I agree that absolutely agree that there are deeply rooted problems about sexuality and sexual assault. However, I absolutely know that if the tables were turned, that this woman would use groping in her past experience as a means of attacking a Democratic nominee to the Supreme Court with sexual allegations alleged against them. Sexual assault allegations alleged against them. That's a wordy sentence, but you know what I'm trying to say. So there is a deeply rooted hyper-partisan component attached to this that can't be ignored. And it is revealing just how, I don't even quite have the word to describe how quickly we revert back to a period of time where we excused this. Well, I guess it wasn't that long ago. I mean, it literally wasn't until the Me Too movement became so popularized, so mainstream. I mean, it existed long before it became mainstream, mind you, but it wasn't until then that we started actually holding people accountable for their sexual assaults. And we still have plenty of people in power right now today who have not yet been held accountable. But how quickly we move away from any standard whatsoever. And I pose it like this because if you look at the people who have been caught up in the Me Too, who have been brought down, and rightfully so, by the Me Too movement, you know, there are probably just as many liberal-leaning men of power who have been brought down by this as conservative. And I mean, at the core of it, surely everyone should understand that sexual assault is a bipartisan problem as well as a nonpartisan issue. But here we are with this trial, this hearing that's getting ready to take place, and they are going to do everything they can to destroy Dr. Ford, and they're going to do so with the same exact tropes and arguments and victim blaming and that have been used historically through this country, and they do so to the detriment of women, and they don't care if it's their own daughters. Also, that they can confirm a guy who could easily, I would think there had to have been some other men who did not have rape allegations in their past. I mean, seriously, this was the best the Republicans could do. No, it's not. There were men on that list who did not have rape allegations, and conservatives Republicans knew about this. That's why they had 65 women sign a statement ready. They had that statement ready as soon as Dr. Ford's allegations came out. So of course, Republicans knew about this, and they did not care. That is the most important thing. Republicans did not care. Not only could they have found another man, they could have easily found a woman, conservative, who would attack Roe versus Wade all the same. But it clearly was not important to them. They wanted somebody, Donald Trump specifically wanted somebody, no matter what baggage he had, he wanted somebody who was both going to protect him, but also in this case, he looked at the guy and said, I don't really care. I simply do not care that he has sexual assault allegations against him. And so in a way, this was a complete slap in the face to the Me Too movement. That's what this was. And now today we're going to see it go even further. We're going to see them try to destroy this woman. Of course, Republican men are smart enough not to do it themselves. They have a what Mitch McConnell called a female assistant who's going to come in and do the questioning. But that's really a disgusting part of this reality, is that, you know, we are reverting back to these tropes of sexual assault. Well, specifically sexuality and how it intersects with sexual assault, because, you know, if Bret Kavanaugh, as he says, if he was a virgin, how could he ever assault a woman? And that's just not the truth. I mean, that's just so far from the reality of both sexuality and sexual assault. It's ridiculous. But that's where we are. So that's the first component of the Bret Kavanaugh. The second one is this whole sense of morality that is at the core of what's driving the evangelical push to support Bret Kavanaugh. It is a farce. These allegations reveal, in addition to several other things, in addition to the handshake that he refused to give Fred Guttenberg, the father of Jamie Guttenberg, who was killed back on February 14th in Parkland, the mass shooting. He refused to shake the man's hand. And the way he looked at Bret Kavanaugh, at the way he looked at Fred Guttenberg, the way he dismissed him with this smug condescension, you know, the way that he carried himself during the hearings, where he couldn't. The moment he got to a question that he was afraid to answer, he turned into a weasel, you know, weaseling his way around it, pretending as though he couldn't remember, pretending that, you know, the allegations on top of everything else really show you that this is not a man of moral character. Morality does not drive him. And yet evangelicals are supporting him to push him into a role to carry out and to facilitate a function, repealing Roe or overturning Roe versus Wade, and doing so based on the concept of morality. Like, to them, the moral thing to do would be for him to overturn Roe versus Wade. And so he has become this moral, quote unquote, moral champion for the evangelical and pro-life movement. And yet at the core of him, we're understanding that he has a complete lack of morality at his core, which makes sense now. It makes absolute sense that a person who does not have morality at his center would be just as okay with having and wielding power over the bodies of women, whether it be through sexual coercion and sexual assault, or assault from the Supreme Court by overturning Roe versus Wade. It's still a man a man with a complete lack of morality, imposing his will and his power on his victims, on women. And isn't this just like, this is exactly what you see in so much of history? Men who are ostensibly ordained to be in leadership, and, you know, according to religious zealots, they are called by God, and yet they're called by God to be moral leaders, called by God to bring morality back, and yet they demonstrate complete bereftness, a complete bereftness of morality. So it's frustrating, but it's illuminating. It's frustrating in that it's bothersome to realize how quickly and willingly we will revert back actually, you know what? We never left. We never left the stage where men could get away with these types of things. I mean, this is like, go back to the Clarence Thomas hearings. I mean, what we're getting ready to see likely is pretty much about the same. The only difference is they're smarter now, and they know to get a quote unquote, according to Mitch McConnell, a female assistant to do the questioning. But she's going to deliver the same exact message that those men would deliver, which is attacking the victim, blaming the victim, trying to question every little facet and every detail, trying to delegitimize her, all in order to get Bret Kavanaugh confirmed to the Supreme Court so that he can wield his power and his will over women, just like he allegedly did back in high school. So real quick before I kick it over to patrons only, Andrew Gillum. Andrew Gillum is the quote unquote progressive candidate. He's the Democratic nominee for governor in the state of Florida. And I've seen a lot of focus on him from progressive circles who are disappointed with his politics, some of his politics, not all of them, but some of them. And I actually agree with all of you on the problems with his politics. I, in fact, wish that he would shut up and just run for the governor of the state of Florida. But he hasn't. And, there are things that he wants to speak out on, particularly Venezuela. And there, some people are attributing that to the Venezuelan population in Florida. They're okay. Sure. Fine. I guess he has to. But here's what I'm getting ready to say is actually a really big conversation. And I'm going to try to keep it limited to the Gillum race, which I'm quite sure I'm not going to be able to do. If you're from Florida, if you've ever lived in Florida, or if you lived in Florida as long as I did, you don't really remember a time when there was not a Republican governor. I vaguely remember back around 94 when I first moved to Florida. Then Jeb Bush became governor. And for the last 20 years, there's been nothing but Republican governors. And in that time, you can't say that they destroyed the state because the state is still physically there. But they brought you things such as stand your ground. They brought you an attack on the education system that has ruined that destroyed millions of young lives. They brought you an attack on the criminal justice system, or an exacerbation of the injustices in the criminal justice system of the state of Florida, which disproportionately attacks and affects people of color. They brought you George Bush with the hanging Chad in 2000, through the help of his brother Jeb. And they brought you some of the very first examples that we had in this modern era of voter disenfranchisement, where a blanket dragnet was placed on the entire system, where hundreds of thousands of people were disenfranchised. I was one of them. DeSantis is the exact same as every other Republican governor in the state of Florida. If he were to win, he would be exactly the same. He is the heir apparent to that same legacy. And as many, I don't know, I can't even say that there's that many things that I disagree with Andrew Gillum on. Name them, like 3, maybe 4. And I'm sure if we get deeper, there will be more. But as many things as is wrong with Andrew Gillum, the magnitudes of order are worse with DeSantis. And for all of the posturing that I'm seeing from people who don't even live in Florida, people who've never been affected by Republicanism in the state of Florida, people who've never been affected by stand your ground, literally having some of our friends literally killed, people who have not been even touched by, you probably even haven't visited, you haven't even gone to Disney World, yet you are grandstanding to make points about a guy who is not going to have any effect on international policy. Not yet. Maybe if he wins the presidency or runs for Senate. A guy who's not going to have any effect on Medicare for all, even though he says he's for it one day and then he says access to healthcare the next day. You know, you're doing this grandstanding at the expense of the citizens of Florida who have been living underneath a Republican reign, 20-year reign. And we have literally felt every bit of it. I think some of you honestly do not understand politics. You don't. Because you know, while you're grandstanding and chipping off, if you chip off one voter here with your grandstanding, that absolutely matters. If you're from Florida and you feel this same way about, you know, Gillum and whatever, fine. I don't know what's wrong with you, but fine. At least you're from Florida. But holy God, we're talking about the opportunity to get rid of stand your ground, to get teachers a minimum starting salary of $50,000 a year, to get someone who has at least said that he's for Medicare for all, even though he later on said he's for access to it. Yes, he has problems. No, he's not. Nobody's going to be your perfect candidate, for the love of God. But we actually have a chance. He's 9 points ahead. And here's the next part. Do you honestly think you would have any capability whatsoever to hold a Republican accountable once they get into power? I'm pausing, not for dramatic effect, because I just need you to think about it. You actually have the ability and the capacity to give a Governor Gillum enough hell while he is in power to make him change, or to at least hear you. Your opposition to someone like DeSantis is actually something that benefits him politically. He not only doesn't care what you want, he takes what you want and he weaponizes it to mobilize his base so he can stay in power. This is literally could be applied across the board. I mean, this is literally can be reduced down to some very simple political principles that I think we miss when it comes time, because we feel it more, beneficial to rant about the things that you disagree with the person who's actually more closely aligned to you. And on a governorship, you actually have the ability to go into his office and to stage a sit-in, and to do so from the left and cause him more political pain, which means he will listen to you because he wants to get reelected. Versus, well, I'm just not going to support this guy because he's not clear enough on Medicare for all. No, I don't really know. Well, of course I don't support the Republican, but I'm using my platform as a means of depressing the vote. Oh, Ben, I only have 10,000 followers. Ben, I only have 5,000 followers. Do you know what the election in 2000 was decided on in West Palm Beach? I mean, but notwithstanding the fact that the Supreme Court actually intervened, right? And made that ultimate decision, notwithstanding that. But do you know that how many elections, how close these elections have gotten? Okay, I've made my point, but I want to make it into I want to reduce it into some very simple political concepts that are really should be taught. I don't know, as politics 101, economics and government in high school. You can't hold your political opposition accountable. You cannot. You can't, because the very existence of your opposition will be used against what you're standing for. Your best chance of actually getting anything that you want accomplished done is by holding people who, whether directly or very, very loosely, are on the same side of the equation as you. They don't have to be your ally. They don't have to be your comrade. They don't have to be any of these things. But the only way you can remotely stand a chance of getting any of your policies implemented whatsoever is by holding the people who can feel your political pain, the political pain that you cause, rather. Let me be very specific. The people who can feel the political pain that you can cause, holding them accountable. But you will have no one to hold accountable if they don't get in power. Because if DeSantis gets in power in Florida, then all of your great points about how Gillum needs to improve its politics will mean nothing, because you're going to have another sociopath in power in Florida who is going to exacerbate every single problem that we as progressives stand for. So, Ben, what do we do? Do we let's just be quiet until the election is over? You know what? If you're not from Florida, do me a favor. Shut the hell up and let Florida elect a governor that we can actually hold accountable. All right. Jimmy Dore segment coming up. He knows nothing about Syria, and he is also a very harassing troll. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show for the rest of the show.